breaking and entering, drunk and disorderly, law and order. A former prosecutor and a defence barrister, not your usual pairing. And the result? Conversations about crime and punishment that are guaranteed to get you thinking.
Welcome to Justice Matters, a weekly podcast with Lizzie Green and Jay Merchant. Our episodes are every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at Justice Matters Pod for clips. Enjoy the episode. This episode deals with assault, rape, and murder, and racial overtones. Discretion is advised.
Well, hello, Jay.
Hey, good afternoon.
How are you?
Good, we're back.
We are back. And today I have been inspired by some students in my Miscarriages of Justice class.
Nice.
They each take a case of wrongful conviction and tell the class about it.
So proper wrongful convictions or not? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is a case I've been familiar with for some time, but they renewed my interest. And I realised when I looked at it, there are some current issues stemming from it, even though it's quite an old case.
Perfect.
So this is, and it's actually been the subject of a Netflix documentary or show from 2019 called When They See Us.
Okay.
But it's the story of the Central Park Five.
Okay. I'm not familiar, so this is great.
All right.
Yeah,
so
let's dive on in.
I'll tell you all about it. So we're going back to 1989.
All right. I was 7 years old.
You were not.
I was born in 82.
Oh my gosh.
The body of a 70-year-old is what you're saying.
No, so much younger than me. That's embarrassing. All right. So 1989, New York.
Yep.
And we're in Central Park.
Okay.
So it was apparently at that time there was a bit of a serious rise in crime in New York City, linked to crack cocaine.
Crack
use.
is whack.
Yeah. And there was some really heightened racial tensions that were
I know there's been some
underscoring.
history there.
Yes. Apparently there were 2,000 homicides in 1989 in New York, which was an all-time high. And on this particular night, there was criminal activity occurring in Central Park. And
like, what do we mean?
well, by all accounts, there was a group of about 30 youths who were harassing and assaulting and stealing from homeless people in the park and people who happened to be in the park on that particular night. So all of this activity was going on. And at the same time, there was a 28-year-old woman who went out for a run.
In Central Park.
So she used to jog there a lot. And so
even though there was all of this turmoil. Okay.
Yep. She wasn't the only jogger out that night. And it was quite early, well, early-ish when she went. It wasn't like 2 a.m. It was between 9 and 10, I think, that she went out for her jog.
All right.
Now, she had invited a co-worker to drop by her place and said, I'm just going out for a run. Come around after that. And so he had turned up. She said she'd be back by 10. And he turned up, but So
10 at night?
Yes. She never appeared. Okay. So just before 10 p.m. that night, as she was passing through a remote section of the park, she was brutally assaulted. She was raped. She was beaten unconscious. And she was dragged to a ravine, and then she was pummeled with rocks and pipes.
Unbelievable.
Horrific.
Yeah.
She was discovered by two men at about 1:30 a.m. that night.
All right.
At that point in time, she was wearing a bra only. She had her hands tied together with a shirt. And when she was taken to hospital, she was still alive. So she was taken to hospital.
I am just picturing what she would have been going through.
Well, she was unconscious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
she stayed in a coma for 12 days.
All right.
Yes. But she had lost 3/4 of her blood. She'd had multiple blows to her head and body, and she had also suffered extreme exposure.
Yeah.
Now, she was only known as the Central Park jogger for a very long time. So this happened in 1989.
Right.
In 2003, she chose to identify herself. But so until that point, she was known as the Central Park jogger, and that was...
So she came out of the coma and all of that then. So she survived this
survived.
brutal attack.
Yes.
Wow.
She had no memory of it, but she survived. So that same night, 2 male joggers reported being assaulted by groups of Black, American, and Hispanic teenage boys. And there were other incidents reported.
So was it the same type of scenario? Like, was he raped or anything like that?
No, there was no rape of the males. I think there was discussion of being hit with a pipe.
Okay.
So some similarities.
Yeah.
And so police had been called, and at 10:40 p.m. that night.
Yes.
So she was discovered at 1:30.
She was.
At 10:40, several boys were arrested by police as they were leaving the park. Okay.
It's such a big park.
It is a big park.
And all right. There better be something linking is where I'm getting, because I'm struggling. It's a huge park. That is a huge city.
And so just to set the scene, 5 boys ended up being charged with the offences committed against that Central Park jogger. They were charged with rape, assault, and attempted murder. So there was Raymond Santana, who was 14. There was Kevin Richardson, who was 14. Antron McRae, who was 15. Yusuf Salam, who was 15. And Kerry Wise, who was 16. So they all got charged, went to trial, got convicted. Now,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do we know, like, I kept referring to the fact that Central Park is massive. There's a pile of people in New York. What linked, and if I'm stealing your thunder, just let me know, but what linked those 5 youths, the 14, 15, and 16-year-old, to the Central Park female jogger?
So 2 of them were arrested that night, and while they were being spoken to by police about those other incidents
with the male
and the homeless people, and
I forgot about the homeless people.
The body of the jogger was found.
Yes.
And so then the police asked them about that.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, honed in on them as being responsible.
See, and I'm immediately thinking about the interrogation tactics of the United States Police compared to when I didn't use a phone book, ladies and gentlemen, but they are allowed a lot of leeway in how they interrogate suspects. They can lie, they can manipulate.
You wait.
Okay,
Jay.
well, I'm patiently waiting.
So they had this little phrase that they used called wilding.
Okay.
Which the police said was going out deliberately to cause trouble and to spread fear. And initially they said that these 2 boys they had first arrested said that they'd been out wilding. Great. Yeah.
The hell does that mean?
Yeah, I know. So Richardson and Santana were arrested that first night. And the charge, or the reason for the arrest, was unlawful assembly. And it was like also referred to as like a wolf pack, that they were part of this wolf pack that was terrorizing Central Park.
Yeah, if you can link them to a crime, I get that. But if you can't, that's what kids that age do. They hang out with a group of people and they just play around.
So they were detained for hours.
I can imagine. Hours. I can see it. I can see it. Yep.
And their parents weren't even called.
Of course not.
And then the victim, whose name is Trisha Meili, I think that's how you say it, Meili, M-E-I-L-I, was found early the next morning, and this link was made. Then the next day, police went to round up more of the group, the wolf pack, and they went to see Salam and McRae and Corey Wise, happened to be with his friend when the police came, and he initially went along with him as support. So he wasn't even initially a suspect.
That you know of.
Well, no, he wasn't.
Oh, okay.
But they ended up talking to him.
Yeah, I can see. I can already. Dodgy.
And so they are all now in police custody, separated into different rooms, and all being questioned now specifically about the rape and assault of the Central Park jogger.
Right.
Okay. Within 2 days, so April 21, the New York Daily News reported that on the night of the crime, a 30-person gang launched a series of attacks, and that included assaults on a man carrying groceries, a couple on a bike, another male jogger, and a taxi driver. And then they reported at least a dozen youths grabbed a woman and dragged her off the path through heavy underbrush and trees, down a ravine toward a small body of water known as the Lock. It was there that she was beaten and assaulted, police said.
Yeah, see, I'm always amazed at how quickly the media finds out about things in the United States.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous. Either there are leaks or something is happening, because at least over here we have a mode of decorum. We just don't see that.
Not in the same way.
Not in the
Absolutely.
same way. I mean, there are leaks, but
a police official,
of course,
told the media they dragged her down like she was an animal. So immediately the narrative is that it's a group of boys who have attacked her and committed this offense.
It's already out there in public. Everybody's in fear now for a group of boys.
Yes. So she was taken to a hospital. She had no memory of what had happened. The surgeon said she had blunt trauma. We didn't know if she would survive, and no one knew who she was at that point. The plastic surgeon, a woman called Dr. Jane Harher, later told ABC News that she's never forgotten that day. She said, "I have seen traumatized patients many, many times, but I have never seen somebody like destroyed. Her body was just so swollen, unrecognizable, really. Her left eye had been crushed in, and the force of the blow to her face was so strong that her eyeball had exploded into the thin plates of her orbital floor." So I'm emphasizing this because I think at the end of the day, there wasn't actually justice for this victim, and she was just put through the most horrendous experience. So New York Magazine said police told reporters that the teens who were being questioned had used the word wilding in describing their acts, and that while they were in their holding cell, they had laughed and sung the rap hit Wild Thing. So all of this information is being shared with the media,
of course,
at a very, very early stage. The crime was splashed across the front pages for months, with the teens depicted as symbols of violence. They were called bloodthirsty, animals, savages, and human mutations.
And the community is looking for answers very quickly. They're on edge. They are anxious. So,
and I should note that these were all young Black boys.
Yep.
I should also note, not a single one of them was known to police, had no contact with police prior to this interaction.
Yeah.
Which to me is hugely concerning.
It is. It's a red flag in the sense that they have no history. So what immediately changed, and then why would it have escalated to what happened to her?
So the New York Post wrote that the teens hailed from a world of crack, welfare, guns, knives, indifference, and ignorance, a land with no fathers to smash, hurt, rob, stomp, rape.
Yeah, that's absolute bullshit. And somebody, like, they should not be allowed to publish that, especially because it is so prejudicial against anyone that is under the spotlight. That just makes my face mad.
So in terms of evidence.
Yeah, I don't know about the evidence.
Yeah, there was no forensic evidence to link them to the crime.
Okay.
At all. But the police were under intense pressure to solve the case.
I don't care.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm glad you don't think that's a good reason. But so rather than going and investigating further and seeing if they could find evidence or, do their job, they decided to get confessions from these 5 boys.
And I'm sure they were all above board too.
So
That's
I
a bit
just
of
want to
sarcasm
also
there.
remind everyone, this is 2 14-year-olds,
Mhm.
2 15-year-olds, and a 16-year-old. And I know that there are kids of those ages who do heinous things.
Yes.
But they are still kids. And when you look at the photos of these boys, they were little. And this whole case to me is one of the worst miscarriages of justice I've ever known. All right, so 4 of the 5 teens confessed on videotape in the presence of their parents following hours of interrogation. And in those confessions, they all admitted they had touched or restrained the victim while one or more of the others assaulted her. Within 2 weeks, every confession had been recanted, and they said that their confessions had been coerced. And they maintained that. They then pleaded not guilty at their trial. There were 2 trials. They all pleaded not guilty. So
But the confessions would have been in, though.
The confessions were allowed
absolutely.
in. So Salam said he could hear the police bashing or beating up Wise in the interview room next to him, and that the police came in and looked at him and said, "You realize you're next?" And he said he was afraid he literally wouldn't make it out of the police station. They were deprived of food, drink, or sleep for more than 24 hours. It's like up to 30 hours.
And of course, none of that was on camera.
No.
Yeah.
The only thing that was recorded
was I did it.
Was the confessions. Yeah. So they, under duress, confessed. The police officers interrogated and deprived them.
And the parents weren't allowed around or anything like that? They hadn't been
called yet. They were called in time for the recorded confessions.
Man.
And none of them had lawyers at that point.
No.
They lied to Yusuf, and the police admitted they lied to him when they were questioning him.
They're devious. They do that in certain jurisdictions.
So they told him that his fingerprints could be found on the jogging shorts of the victim. Poor Corey Wise, who was not a suspect but accompanied his mate, was aggressively interrogated and eventually coerced into confessing. So he was the oldest. He was 16. And he ended up spending the most time in prison, was never even a suspect in the beginning. The teenagers didn't all know each other before they came to the station. Some of them knew each other. Oh, so they didn't
know each other. Okay.
Not all of them were known to each other. And the cops played them off one another. So they told Santana they had evidence against Richardson. Right. And if he helped them build a case against Richardson by placing himself into the crime scene, he'd get to go home. Santana recalled being threatened with life in prison if he didn't confess to attacking her, even though he said he didn't even know who she was or what had happened. They made the boys believe they were acting merely as witnesses to a crime. And so then they eventually confessed.
There's so much wrong that, you've just talked about. How police can manipulate, coerce, pressure I am so thankful that, and I'm sure it has happened, but I'm so thankful that we don't have that over here.
Yeah.
And in Canada, like that there is some semblance of rights. And I'm just astounded. And this stuff still happens today.
Well, I did read that interrogation techniques have evolved over the past 2 centuries. So in the 19th and into the early 20th century, US police sometimes used coercion, like physical violence to elicit confessions.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the coin phrase, phone book comes in.
I know.
Yeah.
And look, to be fair, I think there were those kinds of tactics utilised at times here in Australia until we brought in all of our rules about recording.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
PPRA, or Police Powers and Responsibilities.
But back in the 1930s and 40s, after a series of Supreme Court decisions, US police were forced to change their practices, relying instead on psychological techniques and strategies.
And see, that doesn't change anything for any better.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, it takes away the physical element,
Wow.
but it's no less.
And to a 14-year-old, I'm not sure what's worse, the physical or the psychological manipulation.
Yeah. I show my students a videotape of a boy being interviewed by police. He was 13 in California, and he was being questioned about a murder, and the police officer pulled his chair up really close. He was talking to him. He was saying, you know, your mum will be so disappointed in you.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to talk to you. Like, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And he confessed. He confessed to the murder, and he never did it.
Yeah.
It
makes me sick. Everyone, including police and the politicians that support him, they all deserve to get skidded, canned, fired, the whole 9 yards. It's ridiculous.
So wrong. So, in the confessions, which were detailed, they each argued that while they had not been the one to commit the rape, they had witnessed one of the others do it, and therefore the whole group was implicated because, you're a party then.
Yep.
But they tried really hard to argue that they were coerced, saying that there'd been illegal and improper police interrogations. They'd been misled as to the extent of the DNA evidence against them because there was actually no evidence, and they were lied to about what the other suspects had said about their involvement. There was no recording of any of that. In Richardson's case, he was explicitly told he could go home once he had confessed.
So can I just ask, when you say that he was told that, so how did that come from Richardson himself, or was that from somebody else?
I think police put their hand up for the lies that they'd told.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like they were like, we can lie.
Okay, so they own the fact that they misled and lied. And
the parents said that they just wanted to get their kids out of the police station, and so they said to them, just say whatever the cops want to hear.
Ooh, that's dangerous too.
Yeah. I mean, these are people who have had as far as I know, no interaction with the justice system, with police. Like, their kids have been held for up to 30 hours in some cases. You would be just desperate to get them out of that environment.
No, I accept that. And I guess I'm looking at it from a position that maybe wouldn't be appropriate, but I'm looking at it, okay, why would a parent just say, yep, just tell them whatever they want to hear and we'll get you home?
I guess because, and I did a little bit of research, but one of the reasons that people will make a false confession is because they have an innate belief in the justice system.
Yeah, no, they trust the process.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they all pleaded not guilty at trial. And there was one trial for McRae, Salam, and Santana, and a second trial for Richardson and Wise. So McRae, Salam, and Santana were acquitted of attempted murder but convicted of assault and rape of the female jogger and convicted of assault and robbery of a male jogger.
So the rape, there was no DNA or anything that linked him. It was solely on this coerced confession.
That was it.
Far out.
That was it. And there was DNA, but it didn't match any of them.
Yeah, okay. Well, there we go.
So wait for that.
Yeah, okay.
Richardson was the only one convicted of the attempted murder of the female jogger, as well as sodomy and assault in relation to her. Wise was acquitted of rape and attempted murder, but convicted of lesser charges. Now, Wise, the one who was never a suspect, was the oldest at 16. He was tried as an adult.
I'm surprised the 15-year-olds weren't as well.
Yeah, well, they weren't. But so he got sent to Rikers prison, and his time there, he spent a lot of time in solitary confinement.
You can't put someone like that in Gen Pop. That would be all bad for him. We're not going to get into that, but
so there had been, as I said, the DNA evidence from semen found at the scene, which didn't match.
But it wasn't theirs.
It wasn't theirs. And there was a rock that was found near the scene that had hair and blood on it, which they said was used to assault her.
To bash
That
her.
It didn't match them at all.
Well, and they wouldn't have been found with gloves, so there would have to be some sort of DNA on the rock itself from the perpetrator, you would think.
For it to be useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have matched them.
And so even though they all had these confessions, there were inconsistencies in all of them about times, date, location, actions. So Wise, for example, said in his confession the victim was stabbed with a knife. She had not been stabbed once.
See?
So, they just didn't care. There was also a hair. Oh, you'll love this one. So there was also a hair found at the scene on the victim.
Yep.
And they sent it to a forensic analyst.
Yep.
Analyst,
yep.
sorry.
I knew what you meant.
And so this is 1989. The expert said that the hair found on the victim was similar to Richardson's hair to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
No. Sorry.
I found
that analyst was on crack. Well, he was probably the only one on crack.
I found a quote from the actual trial.
All right.
From the expert. They testified that based on experience examining hair standards, that the finding of a similarity has great probative value. They testified, I've looked at thousands of hair standards over the course of my work, and I haven't seen any that have the same range of physical characteristics yet, but I have in fact looked at thousands of standards and haven't seen two that matched exactly. And so that made it good evidence.
I mean, I know you can buy good report writers these days, but that is phenomenal. It's unbelievable.
Just crazy.
Yeah.
I found a quote also from the trial transcript about McRae's confession because obviously the confessions went in, and so the prosecution had to hone in and place all of this weight on these confessions. But there were questions about, well, were they actual confessions? That's the defense, all they had to say, like that it was not a true confession or whatever it was. And so the prosecutor said, if the detectives made that up, why doesn't the statement have more details in it? Look at the information that is contained in that statement. It's not the information that would be a signed, sealed, and delivered statement that the police gave to Antron McRae to say, okay, this is what you're saying. So they're left with this argument that the veracity of the confession was in the fact that it wasn't exactly right.
See, this goes back to this concept of the prosecution. I mean, you were a prosecutor, you have a duty to the court. And when you identify something as flimsy as this, I'm sorry, the obligation is on you to raise it and say, we don't have enough. There is not enough here. And so I blame the prosecution and I blame the police.
Yeah, well, yes. All right. So their identities and their photographs had been spread widely in the media, including their perp walk.
Yes. Of course. You got to have a perp walk.
And so as a result, prior to the trial, they were subjected to public vilification in the newspapers. The media coverage was aggressive and voluminous and also racist and dehumanizing. So they were all convicted. Okay. So they were convicted and sentenced. McRae was sentenced to 5 to 10 years. Salam served nearly 7 years. Wise was sentenced to 5 to 15 years, and Santana was sentenced to 5, and Richardson was sentenced to between 5 and 10. So I'm just going to put a pin in the fact that they're now convicted and in prison.
Yeah, they're in prison. They're young, vulnerable, and one went to Rikers.
Yeah. So then what happened next? Well, we find out, I'm going to talk to you more about the victim, but we find out that there was another guy in prison called Matias Reyes, and he'd been convicted of a string of rapes and 1 murder, and he was in prison. And he happened to be in the same prison as Corey Wise. And so he met him twice while they were both in prison together. And he realised, Matias Reyes, Corey Wise was in prison for a crime that he himself had committed.
Ah.
Yes. So he told police after the second meeting that he was the one who had attacked and sexually assaulted the Central Park jogger back when he was 17 years old. So this is 2002.
Yeah, so sometime.
Yes. And he said he had acted alone. He was able to tell police details about the attack that weren't public knowledge, and his DNA matched the DNA from the crime scene.
There you go.
Yes.
I mean, it's slam dunk.
So the cops and the prosecutors who were involved with the case said he'd made up the story possibly to get in with Wise, because they said Wise was a high-ranking Bloods prison leader and could provide protection for Reyes. So they doubled down.
Yeah. I struggle to think that a young person is a blood leader in prison. Whatever.
I don't know. So the DNA evidence went against that.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Fuck.
So the sperm profile matched Reyes. Mitochondrial DNA testing on the hairs revealed that they were not related to the victim or the crime. Further testing on hairs found on the victim also matched Reyes, and neither the blood nor the hair found on the rock that had been tendered as evidence against the boys matched the victim. So the whole Crown case is just disintegrated.
It's a mess.
Yeah. And it is actually such a travesty because the things that Reyes was in prison for, apart from one, all occurred after this. So if he'd been identified.
Yeah.
So one of the crimes he'd been found guilty of was another rape he committed 2 days before this incident, the Central Park jogger incident.
All right.
And the victim of that rape had described her rapist as having fresh stitches in his chin, which helped the police to quickly identify Reyes as a suspect.
Right.
And so here his name was on file. His he was known to police at the time that they were investigating the Central Park jogger case.
Yeah.
Not once did they turn their attention to him.
Well, their eyes were focused. They had tunnel vision on these group of kids.
Yep. He was living out of his van at that time. He had, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but he had a rough childhood. Apparently when he was 2, his mother sold him to his father for $400. He said he'd been sexually abused when he was 7 years old. And his lawyer said even as a child growing up in the school system, he exhibited violent behavior. So he was far from normal.
No, and I accept that it wasn't a great childhood. Okay. I can't imagine my dad selling me or my mom selling me for $400 to my dad or whatever. And I can't imagine what he went through. But there are a lot of people that have went through that turn themselves around and are okay.
Yep.
But
so I think, I agree. Like people make choices at some points in their lives. But I'm going to talk about him in a bit of detail because it's linked to the fact I think those victims of his should never have been victims. And
should have been stopped sooner.
That's right.
And they had the ability to do so if they didn't have the tunnel vision.
That's right.
There's this lack of impartiality. Investigations need to be impartial and thorough. And this investigation lacked both of those.
Yes. And also because it had been so long after the crime that he confessed to it, the statute of limitations had run out, and so he could never be charged. And so the victim has no one who's accountable,
That's one good thing that we
do not
have is a statute of limitations. And I accept that historical matters are difficult, but at least if there's something like this, they can at least be held accountable.
Yeah. But so it just contributes to this miscarriage, not just against those boys, but against Reyes's other victims and the actual Central Park jogger herself.
Yep.
So he was only 17 when he first attempted to rape someone. He was talked out of it by his 27-year-old intended victim, who he was holding at knife point. His next known rape occurred in 1989, 2 days before the Central Park jogger, and in the same park. So there were so many reasons to look to him. Determined to lay low as a result of that huge amount of publicity that her rape garnered.
Oh, absolutely.
He didn't assault anyone again until June.
Yeah, he waited until till everything died down.
Somebody
else.
the
We have
rap.
a couple kids that'll take the heat for that one.
But then he resumed his spree with a vengeance. His only known murder victim was a 24-year-old mother of 3 named Lourdes Gonzalez. He invaded her apartment, forced her into the bedroom, shut the door behind them. She was pregnant when he raped her and stabbed her in the belly, and her 3 children were outside the bedroom door listening to the entire thing. She was able to call the police when he fled, but she died on the way to the elevator. She'd been stabbed 9 times, once in the face.
See, this is someone that I wish committed an offense in Concordia Parish in Louisiana.
For the death penalty.
Absolutely.
He apparently said, one of her sons told police, he said, "I'll take your eyes or your kids." Just disgusting.
What do you say to that? I can't wrap my head around it.
So that was June. In August, he attacked a woman known only as Meg by invading her apartment. She managed to escape to the building lobby in nothing but a towel and received help. And he was apprehended after 2 Good Samaritans held him down in the hallway while they waited for the police. When he was booked for the attempted rape and murder of Meg, he confessed to the murder of Gonzalez. He was interrogated for 6 hours, and the detective said that when he was talking about Gonzalez, he didn't call it rape. He said, "We made love." So he's deluded. 2 other victims came forward afterwards and confirmed he had stabbed them superficially in the face before letting them go. That police officer had more than 20 years of homicide interviews under his belt, and he described Reyes as one of the top 5 lunatics he had ever sat in front of. So he got 33.5 years as a plea bargain, and that was in 1991. So there was a lot of...
91.
He was meant to have a parole hearing in 2022, but I couldn't find anything about it. No, that's all right. Yeah. There was questions about, well, why would he all of a sudden confess to the Central Park jogger attack? Why wouldn't he have confessed at the time? Because he put himself in the frame for Gonzalez.
Right.
And so he actually said, "I know it's hard for people to understand after 12 years why a person would actually come forward to take responsibility for a crime. At first I was afraid, but at the end of the day, I felt it was definitely the right thing to do." Good on him.
Well, I'm glad he's turning the pages over.
Yeah. You know, he actually said about the Central Park jogger, "I thought I left her for dead."
Well, he probably did think that. Like the brutal attack, the way she was found.
So the Manhattan DA's office convened an independent panel to investigate that new evidence in his confession. And as a result of that, they recommended that the charges against all of the Central Park 5 be dismissed. And they did, in fact, then overturn the convictions. At that point, only Wise was still in custody. The others had already served their terms of imprisonment.
Can I just say that it's good on that elected district attorney to do that?
Well, they kind of had to, didn't they?
No, I know, but they should have never been in that position in the first place. But good on him to do that. And if that district attorney that made the decision to go ahead with the charge is still alive, he should hold his head in shame.
Well, it's a woman.
Okay, well, lady.
I'll tell you about her as well.
All right.
Okay, so then I did feel bad for the victim because I found out that he was never charged because of the statute of limitations.
Right, they've got that statute.
But I felt a bit conflicted because she did an interview with Oprah prior to Reyes's conviction.
All right.
Because she'd made this miraculous recovery and she had reclaimed her life. She ended up going on to run a marathon and, you know, she did all of this stuff. And she did the New York Marathon, and she got married.
That's pretty spectacular.
Amazing.
Like, it is just unbelievable.
But then after it all came out that Reyes had confessed that the convictions were overturned, she said, "I so wish the case hadn't been settled. I wish that it had gone to court because there's a lot of information that's now being released that I'm seeing for the first time. I support the work of law enforcement and prosecutors. They treated me with such dignity and respect." And I understand that justice is kind of denied her, but it was so overwhelming that they were not guilty.
I know, and I'm not, maybe she wasn't aware to the extent, I'm not sure.
Well, she said, "I always knew that there was at least one more person involved because there was unidentified DNA. So when I heard the news that there was an additional person whose DNA matched, that wasn't a tremendous surprise. But when he said that he and he alone had done it, that's when some of the turmoil started, wondering, well, how can that be?" So I don't know. I feel for her, but I think you have to accept that the police did wrong.
Oh, it was botched from day one.
Yeah.
It really was.
So let me tell you about the prosecutor,
Sure.
or the leader of the sex crimes unit of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Now, have you heard of an author called Linda Fairstein?
Yes.
Yes, I've read her books. I did not realize, but it's the same person.
Oh, Linda.
Linda. So she had been, like, for over 20 years leading the sex crimes unit.
Right.
So she was involved well and truly. She has taken great issue with how the Netflix series portrayed her.
Right.
Saying that she was portrayed as the villain. Apparently in the Netflix series, her character, so
Yes.
the Linda Fairstein character, said things like, "Every young black male who was in the park last night is a suspect." So she was portrayed as being racist and
Right.
tunnel vision. She called the portrayal of herself grossly and maliciously inaccurate, and said that case files and public records will confirm she acted responsibly. I don't think that was borne out. So as a result of the overturning of the convictions, I think also perhaps compounded by the Netflix series, she was told to leave her position in the sex crimes unit. Her publishers dropped her.
Good.
People were calling for a boycott of her. So the hashtag cancel Linda Fairstein quickly picked up steam on Twitter. She had to resign from the Vassar College board, from Safe Horizons, a New York-based nonprofit that helped victims of abuse. And, she's had these very real-world consequences.
But she made those choices, and if she's not going to own and accept it, that's her own fault.
So she has doubled down.
Okay.
She said Martin Reyes may have committed the actual rape, but the 5 were charged as accomplices, as persons acting in concert with each other and with the then unknown man who raped the jogger, not as those who actually performed the act. So she's saying they were still involved.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was super interesting. She did sue Netflix for their portrayal of her. And it was...
Was it settled or?
Yeah, it's settled.
Oh, they shouldn't have settled.
No, I know. So that was in 2020 she sued. It was settled in 2024, but it went to the Innocence Project. So she didn't get any money at all.
Well, yeah, good.
$1 million in settlement. They had to add a disclaimer to the series, saying that it was fictionalized for the purposes of dramatization. And she's saying that it was a win for her. Yeah. But Netflix are saying it was a win for them as well.
Well, I don't think anyone's a winner in this. And in fact, Linda should be lucky that that's all that's happened.
Well, I mean, she did have pretty serious consequences. That's her life's work done.
I'd have no sympathy for her whatsoever.
No, neither do I.
I really don't.
But there was action taken. She's not still in office.
No, I get that.
But then I found out there's also a little bit more.
Okay.
There's a Trump connection.
Oh, I can just imagine.
Okay, so back in 1989,
Okay.
when these boys got charged and were all over the news,
Yes.
Trump paid $85,000, something like that, $87,000 for some full-page pieces in the newspapers,
Okay.
4 of them. And they said, bring back the death penalty, bring back our police. He wrote, I want to hate these murderers and I always will. I am not looking to psychoanalyze or understand them. I'm looking to punish them. Maybe hate is what we need if we're going to get something done. So he was on it from the start.
Yeah.
So,
Jesus, I wish he would just go away.
I
You
know.
know, just stop talking, put the Sharpies down with the executive orders and pardons, and just do your job.
but so he was so public about that, and he was a real estate mogul
Well, he's
at that time.
influential.
Yeah,
He's hugely
very
influential.
And so the boys and their families received death threats after those Trump articles.
Of course.
On a daytime TV show 2 days afterwards, a female audience member called for the boys to be castrated and echoed the calls for the death penalty. There was also a call for the oldest of the group, Corey Wise, to be tried, convicted, and hanged in Central Park. So they definitely felt that that was racially motivated. Yeah. They said, if we were white, would Donald Trump have written this in the paper? And, you know, that was bad enough that it all happened like that back then. But then in 2016, Trump's on the presidential campaign trail.
You bet.
Yep. He was asked by CNN about those ads that he'd taken out about the Central Park 5. And he said they admitted they were guilty. The police during the original investigation say they were guilty. The fact that that case was settled with so much evidence against them is outrageous.
Zero clue. Has no clue. He should just stop talking.
He described it as the heist of the century because
of course.
The boys did get compensation, I think a total of $41 million between them.
Yeah, well, they deserve it.
Absolutely. But he said that the police and prosecutors initially involved in the case have long maintained that they were involved even after the convictions were thrown out. So again, someone who's doubling down.
Yeah.
He didn't apologize for those ads when he was asked in 2019 on Twitter.
I don't think he's apologized for anything.
No, but he said they admitted their guilt.
Yeah.
They never admitted their guilt. Now, once they were released, they changed from being the Central Park 5 to the Exonerated 5. Okay. And in October 2024, they filed a defamation lawsuit against Trump because at the 2024 presidential campaign rally, he said again that they had all pled guilty and that the Central Park jogger had died.
This is what I mean. He just needs to stop. He needs to stop talking.
Idea.
Zero clue. It's one sandwich short of a picnic.
So the lawsuit alleges that he defamed them, cast them in a harmful false light, and intentionally inflicted emotional distress, and that they now have to seek to correct the record once more to clear their names.
Yeah.
And so that was last year, 2024.
Right.
In April of this year, 2025, the judge who heard Trump's application for the matter to be dismissed said, nope, the trial can go ahead.
Okay.
But took out the allegation of intentionally causing emotional distress, but left the rest in. And so he's going to have to answer the defamation claim. And I don't see how he could possibly win because he was saying things that were patently untrue. They never pleaded guilty and the victim didn't die.
And at the time that he made those statements, it wasn't as if he was president at the time. So there's no immunity
Protection.
That would attach.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will be looking for that. The other thing that he did was on the back of this, used it as a push to reinstate the death penalty.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And so it got reinstated in New York at huge cost to the state, then was subsequently abolished without a single execution being carried out. Total waste of time and money. So where are they now?
Yeah.
So they got their settlement.
Good.
It is quite good news for all of them. So Corey Wise received the biggest share. He was the only one who'd been sentenced as an adult. He said, you can forgive, but you won't forget. You won't forget what you lost. No money could bring that time back.
And his time at Rikers would have been absolute hell.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. So he is now, where is he? He lives in New York. He works as a public speaker and criminal justice reform advocate. And he does work with the Innocence Project.
Yep.
Richardson lives in New Jersey with his wife and 2 daughters, working as an advocate for criminal justice reform. McRae lives in Georgia with his wife and 6 children.
Nice.
Santana also lives in Georgia with his daughter, and he started his own clothing company that had one T-shirt called the Brotherhood Tee, which has the first names of all 5 of them on it.
Very cool.
And all of the proceeds from that go to the Innocence Project.
All right.
And Salam was elected to represent Harlem on the New York City Council, assuming office January 1, 2024.
Very cool.
He has 10 children.
Holy.
I know.
It's making up for lost time.
He continues to speak about his ordeal. And in 2016, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Obama.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, they were invited to speak at the 2024 Democratic National Convention by Kamala Harris. And they did that. They, have risen above what happened to them. They have taken their experience and...
It still wouldn't be easy, though.
Oh, I can't even imagine. But, as a result of their case, a new law was put forward requiring police to videotape all interrogations of minors to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
And see, that seems like such a no-brainer for you and me.
I know.
And it should for everyone.
Yeah. So that happened. What else? I think that's probably everything I wanted to say. And then the only other thing I looked at was why would someone falsely confess? And I mentioned that before. But it is a phenomenon. When we look at statistics, there's a huge number of those who have been exonerated who had falsely confessed. So it's not unique to these boys.
Especially with police tactics such that were used in this case, you can see why a number of young people would confess.
Yeah.
Is because they really don't feel like they have an option.
Well, and I think the ordeal of interrogations, like I obviously have never been involved on either side of an interrogation.
They're very sterile here, very
really?
sterile. There is a pro forma of what we would say, and it's very structured.
Right. But, they would have been, and people who have these long interrogations, they're exhausted and emotional and confused and scared. And you just say what they are telling you to say, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah, thankfully we have safeguards here, time frames, there needs to be support people present, and there's certain things that police that they can do and certain things that they can't do. So I'm very comfortable with
our process,
and I'm very thankful that we do have that.
Yeah, it should just be universal.
It should be. It's really not rocket science.
But so do you think that is one of the worst miscarriages?
That's huge. That's huge. Just a question, did they find out who assaulted the man?
No.
You know who I think did it?
Who?
Eileen Wuornos.
Jay, you cannot say that.
I can't. Sorry.
Okay, that is not fact. No reason. That's total.
It was just an opinion. It's Eileen. She's back.
Poor Eileen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was
such an amazing, just a crazy story that should never have happened. And I feel for all of them involved. And I really, when I hear, my time as police, I'll stand up for them when I need to, but I can't stand up for any of that bullshit. In whether you're the police, whether you're the prosecutor, I will call it out in a heartbeat. And that was absolute horseshit.
Yeah. I will just finish with a quote from Salam.
Sure.
He said, "Though we were innocent, we spent our formative years in prison branded as rapists."
Yeah.
There is no coming back from that, is there?
No, there's not. That's just heartbreaking.
So yeah. Anyway, thank you to my students for reminding me.
Yes, and
of
thank
this
you to
case.
your students. Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay.
You bet. Thank you for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review the podcast. If you're interested in clips, check out @Justice Matters Pod on TikTok and Instagram.